ongoing in the country. So far, there are over 9,100 cases and 146 deaths reported in 28 counties across 7 states as of 22nd December 2024. Cholera is an acute diarrheal disease that can kill within hours if left untreated. Let's work together to keep our communities safe. If you or someone you know shows signs of cholera, such as severe watery diarrhea or vomiting, seek medical help immediately and report cases to the nearest designated cholera health facility, health worker, or community leader. Keep hydrated and drink oral rehydration solution or ORS by mixing 1 sachet with 1 liter of clean water to prevent dehydration as a result of diarrhea. Remember, wash your hands with soap and water, especially before preparing food, eating, or after using the toilet. Eat food while still hot. Treat your drinking water, use a toilet, and never defecate in the open. Take ORS and report to the health facility if you have symptoms. Get vaccinated. Together, we can save lives. For more information, contact the Ministry of Health or call our toll-free number 6666. This message is brought to you by the Ministry of Health with support from WHO, UNICEF, and partners.
On iRadio. Good morning. Once again, it's a 7:15, and we are in the second hour of the Dawn Show program. And as I said early in the first hour, that we'll be crossing to Nairobi, Kenya, where Emmanuel Joseph Akile has been following the ongoing Tumaini Peace Initiative, and we'll get the very latest from there. And I suppose he's online right now, so let's get to him on the other side of the studio. Hello, Emmanuel Joseph Akile.
Yes, good morning, Lasuba, Memo, and good morning to all the listeners of iRadio, and also to our viewers on social media. Indeed, I'm here in the capital of Kenya, Nairobi, together with my colleague Lo Nelson, to update the people of South Sudan across the world about the ongoing Tumaini Peace Initiative.
Right. What is the latest from any of the talks?
Yes, what we have today, or the latest so far, is the presentation of or response of the UPA, that's the United People's Alliance, the opposition group. Yesterday, they presented their response to the government after Tuesday's presentation of the government about the initial protocols last year, and it was in the presence of the mediation team. And I would actually, from this forum, invite all our viewers and our listeners to go on our social media platforms, especially on our Facebook, to watch the videos of Ambassador Muhammad Ali Guyo, the deputy of the chief mediator. In the process, we also had an opportunity to hear from the government position or government rapporteur spokesperson, who's the Cabinet Affairs Minister, Dr. Martin Lomoro, and we also heard from Lual Dow, who is the spokesperson and the Secretary General of the opposition. So, Memo, if you can allow me, I will actually give the opportunity to guests in the studio to dwell more on that.
Please proceed, Emmanuel Joseph.
Thank you, Lasuba. Memo. Our guest in the studio today is Rajab Mohandis, a member of the People's PCCA, well known, and as he's well known to all South Sudanese as a civil society activist. Rajab Mohandis, it's good to have you with us in our mini studio in Nairobi this morning. Welcome to iRadio.
Thank you, Emmanuel Akile. My greetings to you and all the listeners of iRadio.
Yes. Let's begin with what happened yesterday. I understand the opposition responded to the presentation of the government about the initial protocols, and the document was presented, and the stakeholders were actually present. And then tell us what happened yesterday, Rajab.
Well, thank you. The presentation was made in the morning session of yesterday, and it was delivered by General Pagana Mum, who is the leader of the United People's Alliance, UPA. And the presentation that they made on behalf of the opposition, responding to the presentation from the government, was in 3 or 4 sections. The first section talked about the RRCs, why the opposition at the time, the holdout opposition groups, did not sign the agreement, that they felt there were manipulations in the process of the negotiations. And then the second part raised a lot of questions to the government on the RRCs and why it has not been fully implemented. And there was a section that talked about why the opposition believes or gave the reasons that the opposition believes were responsible for the failure to fully implement the RRCs. And they concluded by saying they stand with the protocols and suggested that the protocols should that have been negotiated and agreed upon and others initialed should be the basis for these negotiations, and that the negotiations moving forward should focus on the remaining items, including the issue of responsibility sharing, and also concluding with the timeline for signing the agreement.
Right. So what are we expecting today? What's going to happen?
Well, the mediation actually in the schedule for yesterday expected that in the afternoon there would now be kind of discussion on the presentations, on the positions of the government and the opposition. Of course, the position of the government has been the same as it was by December when we concluded that round of negotiations, insisting that the RRCs remains the framework for the negotiation, the main framework agreement for the country, and everything else that emerges out of the Tumaini Peace Initiative should be annexed to the RRCs. And now the presentation from the opposition yesterday also kind of maintained their position that the negotiation should proceed from where the whole thing stopped by the time the government went back to Juba. And so at this point, there was supposed to be a negotiation now in the afternoon, but then the government delegation requested that they needed that time yesterday in the afternoon and the whole of today to reflect on the presentation of the UPA and get back to the discussions. So we expect to be waiting until tomorrow when the government delegation will get back with their feedback on the presentation made by the opposition. And this also gives us time as the stakeholders to then do our analysis on both positions presented by the government and the opposition, and then put forward our own observations and perhaps recommendations on what we think should be appropriate at this point.
Right. And Mr. Rajab, during the presentation of the opposition and in the document, what are the key main issues raised or concerns that emerge in the presentation of the UPA yesterday?
Well, the first was historical background to the RRCs. And I guess they made an attempt to try to justify why from why the RRCs, the difficulties with the implementation of the RRCs emanated right from the time it was negotiated in Khartoum. That the initial intention of the government of Sudan at the time in taking up the responsibility to mediate this process from Addis and IGAD to lead the mediation was partly to fulfill their interests in South Sudan, their national interests in South Sudan, relating to aspects of their interest in oil and resources in South Sudan to feed into their economy. And that, in their view, was how the whole negotiation was shaped, including deployment of individuals who were closer to the Khartoum government to take lead in the government in South Sudan. So that the background was one thing that they took long to try to justify, and they believed that the failure of implementation of the agreement was partly from those negotiations. They also went on to raise a lot of questions, and their questions were kind of responding to the presentation of the government. And in the questions they were raising, they were asking if the agreement, for example, has resolved the conflicts in the country as presented in the position of the government, why would the president initiate negotiations as a way to try to resolve conflicts? That means the conflicts are still prevailing. And they went on to mention where there are gaps and challenges with the implementation of the agreement broadly. Those are things that are of common knowledge, that we know the difficulties with implementing, for example, the transitional security arrangements, restrictions of political and civic spaces for political actors who are members of the RTGON or the RRCs currently, the parties in the RRCs. So that was one thing they focused on. And of course, as I mentioned, they presented a clear position that the negotiation should focus on the protocols that were negotiated, agreed upon, and those that were signed.
What about the issue of elections? Was it like something raised by the opposition in terms of ensuring that the 2026 elections are going to happen, or whether there's another new time frame for the elections to take place?
Well, the paper they presented did not really go into details about anything to do with the elections. They only mentioned, I think, a paragraph saying the failure to deliver on the transitional security arrangements and other aspects of the RRCs affected the timeline for conduct of the elections. And they did not touch on the extension and the new timeline for the elections in the country. Their call was for continuation of the negotiations from where it stands now as of the protocols.
And what's the position of stakeholders in terms of the conflicting statements for the last 2 or 3 days? We're hearing from the government and the opposition about Tumaini should be an annex to the revitalized peace agreement or a standalone agreement.
First, we in the stakeholders believe that yes, we have the RRCs as an agreement or a framework agreement for peace in the country. We also acknowledge the difficulties that the implementation of the RRCs is facing. You may recall some of us who are part of the RRCs in terms of the negotiations and also part of the implementation process. And we acknowledge that there are sincerely difficulties in delivering on the commitments of the agreement. And thirdly, the stakeholders believe that There is nothing wrong with the content of the RRCs, and there is nothing wrong with the content of the protocols that have been signed. But there is everything wrong with the way the implementation is progressing, and therefore there is need to build consensus on renewing commitment and addressing the challenges affecting the implementation, to be able to come up with a framework that could deliver peace in the country. And we think that moving the way things are moving, the state of affairs are largely not progressive in the country, and that needs to be addressed. So we think that there is need. And we also think that the parties should be able to see the sense in the content of both frameworks that each party is holding, and that it is possible to simply merge all of this and have a framework that would take the country forward.
Right. And looking at the whole process, where we have been engaging with the people of South Sudan back home there on daily basis in regard to agreements being discussed, being negotiated, agreements after agreements, it's almost like most of them have actually lost hope in signing of agreements. And yesterday our guest here was Battery Godi, youth representative, and he echoed the same thing. So how different can this Tumaini Peace Initiative really be compared to other agreements signed previously, which were not fully or are not fully really implemented, Rajab?
Well, you know, we are a revolutionary country that emerged out of a long period of liberation struggles. And the nearly half a century of the liberation struggle was marked by clear definitions of the narrative of the struggle, the purpose, and what we wanted as an ideal state for ourselves as people. And so we believe, I personally believe, that the peace is not in the agreements that are being signed. The peace is in the hearts and minds of the people of South Sudan. And so if the political leaders really want to deliver peace in the country, they can do that even without looking at the content of the agreements. They can simply wake up in the morning and do the things that we have always talked about as people and as a country in the long journey of our struggle to independence. And we will have a peaceful and prosperous South Sudan. So even if we sign these agreements, if the peace is not coming from the hearts and minds of the South Sudanese, and particularly the leaders, we will not make progress. So we should look at the issue of delivering peace as a commitment of the South Sudanese, but also the leaders, beyond just signing the agreements. And so we think that this should be the guiding principle in even the negotiations. The premise of the negotiation should be more than just trying to get political parties into the RRCs and then moving on. But it should be a real commitment that is meant to deliver peace. That should happen even if we do not have an agreement. And so the agreement would help in terms of providing clear roadmap on how we proceed to deliver peace for ourselves.
And Rajab, on our social media or wherever we post something about Tumaini Peace Initiative, people talked about waste of resources. People talk about who are the donors or the funders of this process, and they are actually linking this process back home to the lack of service delivery, civil servants going for months, like more than a year, without receiving salary. So as an activist, what would you say in that regard?
Well, first of all, we should be positive about negotiations or peace negotiations, because you see, if you lose something and you don't look for it, you have less chance of getting it than when you go to look for it and struggle to find it. And so we have challenges in the country, and sitting without doing anything is not a better option. So there is need for South Sudanese to reason together, to engage in constructive dialogues and negotiations such as this, to be able to find solutions. So that is important, and therefore we should not look at the negotiation as being a waste of time and resources. With regard to who is funding this or putting in resources, we have seen some partners that we know and we were told by the mediation that they were putting in resources. Some international partners, and I would leave that to the mediation to clarify. And but now, with regard to this process taking away resources from South Sudan, it may not be entirely the case, because first, when we became independent, we expected to have a lot of things, services, strong, roads, education, good education, and health services, and all of that. But all along, we haven't delivered on those things. So these negotiations do not come as the reason to justify why we do not have all of those things. However, this negotiation should be seen as a way to address these challenges that we have in terms of limitations of resources to fund activities, including payment of salaries of civil servants. These are issues that have been there with us even before these negotiations. And if this process leads to an agreement that would deliver peace in the country, those issues could possibly be solved in that regard.
And also, other question which is emerging every now and then from the people of South Sudan there is, what's the difference now between Tumaini Peace Initiative and the Revitalized Peace Agreement? Why should they now trust that Tumaini will be a success? And since the Revitalized Peace Agreement, 6 years down the line, not being fully implemented, situation continue to remain the same. And also, Rajab, what about the inclusion of others who are not actually part of the Tumaini initiative, likes of General Thomas Cirillo and Simon Gadwich and Emmanuel Jawin, among many others?
Yes. Well, first, in regard to what is different between the Tumaini Peace Initiative and the RRCs, we should learn from our experiences. We came to the RRCs from the RCs. When the RCs was signed in 2015, it faced difficulties in 2016, less than a year into its implementation. There was a crisis in Juba, and eventually the implementation of the agreement stalled. And it was on that basis that IGAD said we could not continue like that, so there was need to do revitalization. And in the revitalization, you may recall that there were only 2 parties that signed the RCs in 2015. So the revitalization opened up the process to get more parties into the RRCs. In other words, to made an attempt to get the parties who are still engaging in the conflict violently to come and be part of a peaceful political process to find solutions. And so the RRCs came out as a result of that. Now the RRCs, from all indicators that we have, has also not delivered on its intended objectives. It's also, in our view, personally, I would say it is largely stalled as well, its implementation. And so it takes us back to the process of saying, when we are not moving, there is need to come back to do an analysis. In project management, you do evaluation as to what is happening and why things are moving well or not moving very well, and where you need to make adjustments. So this Tumaini Peace Initiative offers that opportunity for reflection and evaluation of the overall implementation process and what could be done better. So in our view, this would be a way of, it's a way of revitalizing what has been revitalized to better proceed. And so in this process, we think that there is need to renew commitment and to agree to do things a little differently in order to deliver peace in South Sudan.
Right.
Now, the other aspect,
yes,
as you said, with regard to those who have not joined this process, what happens?
Yes.
Calls have been made by President William Ruto, by President Kiir, and also by the mediation. I am aware of letters that were written to the other actors who are not currently in the process. I'm also aware of meetings that were held directly engaging with them, and phone calls that were made to them to be part of this process. And I think it is the choice of quite a number of them not to be part of this process. And so, in our view, we would prefer to have everyone at the negotiating table for a peaceful political process in finding solutions to the situation in our country. So we would appeal to all the actors to be part of this process so that the crisis in our country is resolved peacefully and resolved once and for all.
Right. And something also very important now, is the Tumaini in agreement with the extended transitional period, or for the elections to be conducted in 2026 if the Tumaini succeeds, for instance, and they signed it finally?
No, there is no specific provision on the conduct of elections in the Tumaini Peace Initiative. And it is, I guess, something that should also be addressed before conclusion of this negotiation. At the moment, initially, the understanding actually by the beginning of the Tumaini Peace Initiative was that the negotiations would conclude before the end of last year, and then there would be participation of all the actors in the electoral process. This was not the case. The negotiation continued beyond the timeline for elections for last year, and so the extension was made when the negotiation was still going on. So it is something that may need to be discussed, especially if some of the deadlocks are unlocked and then negotiation proceeds towards conclusion. The issue of timeline for elections may need to be defined as well.
Right. Lasuba, Memo, let's go back to you there in our main studio. We read few comments or pick a few calls there to نذكر لمستمعي اي راديو في كل مكان. ده البث المباشر من العاصمة الكينية نيروبي، مبادرة بتاعة تومايني، واحنا هنا في الاستوديو بتاعنا المصغرة مع الضيف بتاعنا في الاستوديو اللي هو رجب مهندس. نرجع للزميل بتاعي لسوبا ميمو عشان نرفع بعض من المكالمات قبل ما نرجع لاستديوهاتنا المصغرة ونرفع ويقدر يجاوب لبعض من الأسئلة. لسوبا ميمو, back to you there in Juba.
Thank you indeed, Emmanuel Joseph Akila. And now, of course, let's pick a few calls from the listeners. And just to remind you, listener, you can follow this discussion live on iRadio's YouTube. And if you have any comment, you can also drop there. And in the meantime, let me turn to your calls and forward your questions. Hello, good morning.
Lasuba, Memo, good morning.
Good morning.
David Mago from Wow.
Yes, David.
Let me welcome the guests to the studio and Emmanuel Joseph Akila in Nairobi.
Yes.
Raja Mandis plus Wani Michael, they were the people claiming the right of South Sudanese, including Kwela Agüer, and fortunately, they become the victim. And those who were fighting for position are the ones that the government is running after them now with the peace. Where is the right of South Sudanese here, Raja Mandis? Is this peace for us or for the politician? Because our artist is for a politician and not benefiting us. Tumaini agreement is for politician and is not benefiting us. For how long are the politicians going to fight for position in the state of the country to be changed to help South Sudanese? This is number one. Number two, we are talking about implementation. The agreements being taken by the politician at their advantage to remain in position and make extension all the time and fail to implement the agreement as they are always doing it. When will the South Sudanese will be given chance to own their government or to benefit the independence of the country? Thank you.
Thank you indeed, James Magog there. The guest will respond to you. Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Yes.
You are speaking for Franco City.
Yes, it's Franco.
السيد رجب مهندس طبعا تصور ناشط مدني وكنت بتطالب عن النظام الديمقراطيه في جنوب السودان. هسه حاليا طبعا الاحزاب الموجود في الدومين ده هو احزاب غير مسجله في الدستور، حتى ايوم غير مسجل في الدستور. ليه ما يتفقوا على اساس انه نحن نخش انتخابات؟ لان الشعب بتاع جنوب السودان هم الفيصل، هم صاحب القرار الاخير في شعب جنوب السودان، بدل ما هم يضيعوا زمن فنحن نتفق على زمن وقت زمنيه محدد عشان نخش في وبعد ذلك كل زول ياخذ مكانته حسب البروسيس بتاعت الحزب.
All right, Franco Sebit. Hello, good morning. Good morning. Naam.
Hello.
Yes.
Zemana.
Naam, marhab.
From Haitara.
Marhab.
Thank you, Emmanuel Akile, and also your guest, Rajab Mohandis, in Nairobi there. I have two questions to your guest inside the studio. Rajab Mohandis, according to your analysis, do you think that those people, they are going to come back in South Sudan by peace or not, according to your analysis? Because what I know, those guys look like they have no something called political will. One. Number two, opposition say this is the lasting peace. This is the lasting chance for peace in South Sudan, whereby we are still have Thomas Cirillo outside the country. The other day say because a chance the South Sudan as Ambijibo Salam or the Animongi is going to be the lasting peace, the lasting chance the South Sudanese school as Ambijibo Salam to South Sudan. لكن أنا أعرف لما lasting peace لأنه لسه عندنا ناس كتار بارا زي توماس سيريلو بيتر أجواني سبارا. ده ممكن هذا سؤال تعالى. Thank you.
اسم تاكي؟
سليمان.
Oh, Suleiman. شكرا عليك. Okay, Suleiman doubts about the talks of lasting peace. The agreement being said would bring lasting peace. Hello, good morning.
صباح الخير يا رادي.
Sabah Noor.
دين سانتوس واو.
Yes, Deng Santo.
أنا بحي ضيوف بتاعنا رجل مهندس وبيفهم معه وأخونا بتاعي رادي. أنا السؤال بتاعي ثلاثة رجل مهندس. طبعا أنتوا كنتوا ثلاثة وأنتوا هربتوا من جنوبنا وخيروا كلا أقوى في السجن وأنت أصلا بميت مع ناس فقان مع كله مع جروب. هل السؤال هذا بتاعكم واحد؟ شكرا.
All right, shukran عليك. Deng Santo هناك في واو. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes.
Yes, you are connected with Jimmy Dwar.
Yes, James Dor.
Thank you. Good morning, Emmanuel Joseph, and good morning to Chief Rajab Mandis.
Yes, proceed.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to ask the question to the stakeholders, not Chief Rajab Mandis in the studio. My question to the stakeholders and civil society, church-based group, and women representatives is that what is their position over the argument that's going on right now for Temeini to be a stand-alone agreement and government position of making our access, making Temeini initiative to be the complement to the R access. What is your position as whole this group who are overseeing the negotiation and even making some comment on this agreement? This is one, and I need all the stakeholders and other observing groups to have a strong position. Either we dwell on stand-alone agreement or complement the agreement with the reason. The second question to the team that negotiating in the opposition parties, let's say, what is their inner goals after they achieve the Temeini to be the stand-alone agreement? Thank you.
All right, thank you, James Dor. Let me pick another call and then we give the chance to the guests. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. You can return your call. Let me turn to someone else. Good morning.
يا لاسوبا ميمو
نعم.
معك أستاذ مجوب.
مرحب أستاذ مجوب.
هنا لا بنجري هناك في نيروبي إيمانويل جسر بتكلم مع أستاذنا الكبير رجب مهندس. أنا بس سؤالي بيقول إنه رجب مهندس طبعا التومايني ده أنا شايف إن البنود الموجود في التومايني نفس البنود الموجود في ريفايتلايز في أجريمنت. لأن الموضوع بتاع الأمن موجود، الموضوع بتاع تقسيم السلطة موجود، الموضوع بتاع الدستور الدائم موجود، يعني حتى الموضوع بتاع وزارات. يعني أنا شايف إنه الجديد أنتم بس خلطوا قال في هيك مجلس، يعني المجلس يعني برئاسة الرئيس والنواب ممكن جزء منكم بيكون فوقه. طيب السؤال بتاعي بقول كالآتي: إذا كان الرباية لا يصير أجنون فشل إنه الحكومة ينفذوا مع شركاء بتاعه، أنتم الآلية اللي بتجي تنفذوا تماعين ده عشان ينفذوا ده يعطوا آلية، يعني يعطوا سهرة يعني عندكم عشان الجماعة فشلوا وأنتم جايين عشان تنفذوا بيعطوا آلية أنتم جايين تنفذوا الاتفاقية ده. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا لك أستاذ مجوب. Let me let me get back rather to the team in Nairobi. Manuel Joseph Akile, those have been some of the questions and remarks as well from the listeners.
All right, indeed, Lasuba Memo, we got all the questions, and Rajab Muhandis was also getting the questions as well. We have about 6 callers. David Magog from Wow, Franco Sebit there in Juba, Suleiman in Haitarawa. We have Deng Santo, we have James Dwar from the University of Juba, and Ustaz Majok hinak fi Mangaten fi Juba. Rajab Muhandis, we've got about 12 minutes, so you can respond to the questions now.
Well, thank you, Emmanuel Akile. The first question from David Magok is about the RRCs and also the Tumaini Peace Initiative are for the politicians. And so when do we have an agreement for the people? Now, in the modern society, countries are governed by political parties or political actors. And so it is not a surprise that political actors negotiate in a political process like this. Now, when do we get peace for the people? It is when the people participate in these processes and ensures that the political actors take into consideration the aspirations of the people, that their decisions are informed by the needs of the people. And one of these ways to get the parties to ensure that they take into consideration the needs of the people is for the participation of the stakeholders, which involves faith-based leaders, women groups, youth, civil society, and all these other groups, academia and so forth, in this process. So our role is to bring in the aspirations of the people to ensure that this is taken into consideration. So negotiations are likely to always be in this format. Now, the second aspect is about the question. I mean, David had 2 questions, but I guess I missed the second one.
So, asking about the position of the stakeholders about this process, and it's also talked about extensions after extensions as well.
Yes. Well, thank you. With regard to the position of the stakeholders, we think that it is possible to reach a meaningful agreement in these negotiations by finding a middle ground or a compromise position. And that compromise position can be a blend of both the RRCs and the Tumaini Peace Initiative. Because definitely the failure to implement the RRCs means there are areas that need improvement. And the Tumaini Initiative touched on some of those things. So if you put the two together, you can have a stronger framework for peace that has a higher potential for implementation.
Right.
Yeah, and then the question from Franco, I also, you might need to read it.
Yeah, Franco Semedo is saying, why can you agree for the way forward in terms of elections?
Yeah, well, the aspect of elections will definitely be part of the negotiations. By the time, if the Tumaini Peace Initiative were to conclude successfully, it will definitely have a provision in the timeline on elections. Now, Suleiman talked about, do we think
They'll come back with
yes, these parties will go back with peace.
We talked about the other generals who are not also part of this process, other groups as well.
Yes.
Cirillo, for instance.
Absolutely. Thank you. Now, well, you see, whether these parties will go back to the country with peace or not will depend on how they contribute to this process and build compromise. I mean, and agree to compromise. And so far, the delay, the whole of last year, from the time the negotiations started in May to the end of the year, gave us an impression that, there is also a very slow process with a lot of disagreements. If the process went the way it went from the beginning to July last year, there's a hope that there will be an agreement, because the process went with a lot of speed and a lot of things were done, including all the protocols. So we think that the negotiations should focus on these key aspects and make progress. And those who are not in the process right now, as I mentioned earlier, were informed and invited. It was their choice just not to come. But it is also because they don't perhaps see the seriousness expressed in these processes. And so the success of this process would be a convincing factor for them to be part of the peace process. So it is important to make this process successful. Now, there was a question on the next question.
Yeah. Deng Santo was asking about the goal of the stakeholders, whether you are in the same position with the opposition, actually.
Yes. It is always seen that in South Sudan, generally, people always see the opposition and they see the government. They don't see another group. Yeah. We are another group. And we are a group that is called the civil society or the stakeholders. Our difference with these parties is that they hold or they pursue political power. They want to take political power. Those who are not in power. And those who are in power want to maintain it. We are not aspiring for political power. So we are not asking to be appointed ministers when we participate in this process. Our role is to ensure that the outcome of such processes actually deliver for the good of all citizens. That's what we aspire to pursue in these processes. So we do not share goals with the opposition, and we do not share goals with the government in terms of what they want to achieve, but we share a common goal for peace. If everyone wants peace, that is where we would be. Now, the question on Tumaini initiative to be a standalone agreement or an annex to the RRCs.
That's James Dore. Yeah.
Yes, from James Dore. What do we think about that? We think that there is so much now on what we call the politics of the documents. One party says the agreement should be the RRCs, the other one says the agreement should be the protocols. And we think that all of these are okay, especially if we are able to merge them and have a way forward. So that would be our position. That would be our position. Now,
right.
The last question?
Yeah. Last question was from Stas Majok. He is talking about the position, or most of the provisions in the Tumaini Peace Initiative or the protocols are already enshrined in the revitalized peace agreement. So what's new, and how can it really be best implemented since the revitalized peace agreement is not fully being implemented?
Yes. First of all, there is no harm in having these provisions in the agreement or in the Tumaini Peace Initiative. You know, the RRCs emerged from the RCs, and it has most of the provisions of the RCs. And we think that there are things that have been discussed, especially in the Tumaini Initiative, that could help in supporting or facilitating implementation. One of them is the issue of management of resources that the Tumaini Peace Initiative attempted to address. The second is the aspect of support of the region and the international community. You may be aware that when the RRCs was signed, there were a number of the international partners who were supporting the implementation mechanisms to some extent, and quite a number of them walked out of these processes, partly because they were kind of frustrated by the way we were not fast enough in implementing those processes. And so the Tumaini Peace Initiative also made an attempt to bring back those partners and the support they could accord to us, maybe technical and perhaps political and financial support that they would provide to South Sudan to help in pushing with the implementation. So there are some of these aspects, and also the aspects of the implementation mechanisms that the Tumaini Peace Initiatives tried to strengthen to help in the implementation process. So those were things that were discussed and agreed upon to be able to push the process.
Right. Any last remarks or message before we can wind up?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, we think that it is important for the parties to use this process as an opportunity to address the crisis and failure of implementation of the peace agreement in the country, to allow us to resolve our internal challenges, revamp the economy, address the issue of the security sector, and address the mounting humanitarian situation, the crisis that keeps so many of our citizens unable to feed themselves, and also in refuge and displacement camps, so that we become strong as a country to face other threats that we have. Currently, we are aware of the challenges our citizens are facing in other countries, and if we were organized enough and strong, we would have been in a better position to help our citizens in the situation they are facing. So we need to consolidate peace in our country to be strong enough to resolve and address crisis within our borders and also outside.
Right. Rajab Mohandis, civil society activist and a member of People's Coalition for Civil Actions. Thank you very much for joining us on the Dawn today. لاسوبا ميمو ده كله ما عندنا الليله من العاصمه الكينيه نيروبي. انا والزميل بتاعي خلف او behind the scene Lo Nelson. We go back to you there before we can cross to the news desk for news in Arabic. That's all for today. And we say have a blessed weekend. We will catch up again on Monday, and remember, follow us on our social media platforms. We'll continue to update you on a daily basis on the course of the day about the developing stories here from the Tumaini Peace Initiative. Lasuba Memo, back to you.
Thank you, Emmanuel Joseph Akila. And indeed, the news is up next. When I return in the next hour, we will be looking at empowering girls through menstrual health education and sustainable development.
مباشر من جوبا على الهواء وعلى الانترنت.
ده آي راديو، عينك على جنوب السودان.
صباح الخير، اهلا ومرحبا بك مستمعي آي راديو. ده زمن نشر اخبار، وبنبدا بالعناوين. أعرب خبير اقتصادي ومستشار في مكتب نائب الرئيس جيم سواني إيجا عن مخاوف بشأن التغيرات الاقتصادية لحظر وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي اللي فرضته الوحدة القومية للاتصالات. قال ممثل للشباب في عملية السلام اللي تقودها كينيا في جنوب السودان بأن مبادرة تومايني يجب أن تضمن تنفيذ صندوق تنمية مشاريع الشباب. وتواصل المعارك بين الجيش السوداني وقوات الدعم السريع في بلدة جيلي شمال الخرطوم اليوم الثاني في صراع للسيطرة على مصفى النفط. إلى تفاصيل النشرة وفي تقديمه أوباج أوكوت شاقاوم. أعرب خبير اقتصادي ومستشار في مكتب نائب الرئيس الدكتور جيمس واني إيجا عن مخاوفه بشأن تداعيات اقتصادية لحظر وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي الذي فرضته الهيئة القومية للاتصالات. الحظر اللي يشمل منصات مثل فيسبوك وتيك توك أثار جدلا واسعا حول تأثيراته على الأعمال التجارية والتواصل وتوليد الإيرادات. وأشار الدكتور أبراهام ماليت أن وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي أصبحت جزءا أساسيا من التنمية الاقتصادية في البلاد، محذر من أنه الحظر قد يعطل الأعمال التي تعتمد على هذه المنصات للإعلانات والتفاعل مع العملاء والمبايعات. كما حذر الخبير الاقتصادي من أنه الحظر قد يكون له تأثير سلبي متسلسل على قطاع التكنولوجيا بشكل عام، بما في ذلك مزودي خدمات الإنترنت ورواد الأعمال الرقميين. وأضاف أنه هناك احتمال لحدوث أضرار طويلة الأمد على اقتصاد جنوب السودان إذا فقدت الشركات الثقة في استغلال البنية التحتية للاتصالات. ودعا الدكتور ماليد الحكومة إلى مراجعة الحظر بشكل عاجل، مقترحا اتباع النهج أكثر استهدافا لمعالجة المخاوف المتعلقة بخطاب الكراهية والمعلومات المضللة على وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي. وطالب بإجراء تقييم شامل لتأثير الحظر الاقتصادي واتخاذ إجراءات سريعة لمنع المزيد من الأضرار. الحظر الذي من المقرر أن يستمر لمدة أقصاه 90 يوما لكنه قد يقتصر على 30 يوم، أثار بالفعل نقاش واسع بين صناع القرار والمجتمع المدني وقطاع الأعمال. دعا وزير الخارجية مجلس الأمن الدولي إلى دعم الدول الأفريقية في تحسين سبل معيشة مجتمعاتها لمنع من وقوع ضحية للأيديولوجيات المتطرفة. كان رمضان محمد جوج يتحدث مع مجلس الأمن الدولي في نيويورك حول تعزيز القيادة الأفريقية في مكافحة الإرهاب وتعزيز السلام والأمن المستدامين. وأكد على ضرورة أن يدعم مجلس الأمن الآليات التي تضمن موارد مالية مباشرة وموثوقة لتحقيق رؤية الاتحاد الأفريقي 2063 لأفريقيا سلمية ومزدهرة بما في ذلك جنوب السودان. وقال إنه يجب إعطاء الأولوية لتحسين التعليم والبنية التحتية وتوظيف الشباب وتمكين النساء لتقليل تعرض المجتمعات للانخراط في الأيديولوجيات المتطرفة. في سبتمبر من العام الماضي وافق الرئيس سلفا كير على 3 اتفاقيات دولية لمكافحة الإتجار غير المشروع بالمخدرات والجريمة المنظمة عبر الوطنية وتمويل الإرهاب. تضمن الاتفاقية الدولية لسنة 1999 لقمع تمويل الإرهاب التي تعزز التعاون الدولي في ابتكار واتماع تدابير فعالة لمنع تمويل الإرهاب. كما شمل الاتفاقية الأخرى اتفاقية الأمم المتحدة لمكافحة التجارة غير مشروع بالمخدرات والمؤثرات العقلية التي تم اعتمادها في سنة 1988. وتهدف الاتفاقية للحد من تحويل واستخدام بعض المؤثرات العقلية مثل المنشطات المركزية والمحدئات والممنوعات والحلوسة التي تسبب مشاكل صحية واجتماعية عامة في جنوب السودان. ومع ذلك كان الوزير رمضان على الحاجة إلى تعزيز نظام الاستخبارات المالية وأمن الحدود لتعطيل مثل هذه الشبكات. قال ممثل للشباب في عملية السلام التي تقودها كينيا في جنوب السودان بأن مبادرة تومايني يجب أن تضمن تنفيذ صندوق تنمية مشاريع الشباب. باتريك جودي هو عضو في منبر المجتمع المدني لجنوب السودان أوضح أنه هذا الأمر تم تضمينه في اتفاقية السلام المنشطة لسنة 2018 لكنه لم ينفذ حتى الآن. وأضاف جودي أن مبادرة تومايني يجب أن تعيد إحياء صندوق دعم الشباب لتمكين شباب جنوب السودان اقتصاديا. ووفقا لجودي فهذا سيسهم في تشجيع الشباب على المشاركة الفعالة في إعادة بناء اقتصاد البلاد. جاء ذلك خلال الحديث لبرنامج دون على إذاعة آي راديو في نيروبي كينيا يوم أمس. يشكل الشباب في جنوب السودان حوالي 72% من السكان لكنهم يواجهون العديد من التحديات التي تحد من فرصهم في التعليم وسبل العيش. وتعد بطالة الشباب واحدة من أكبر المشاكل الاجتماعية التي تواجه البلاد. وتشير الدراسات أن الشباب يمثلون أكثر من 70% من سكان البلاد، لكنهم يشكلون فقط 12% من القوى العاملة. وهذا الوضع يطرح العديد من التحديات مثل محدودية مشاركة الشباب في صنع القرار وانخفاض استيعابهم في سوق العمل وتباطؤ نمو الاقتصاد الوطني. وفي الأخبار الإقليمية والعالمية، في السودان تواصلت المعارك بين الجيش السوداني وقوات الدعم السريع في بلدة جيلي شمال الخرطوم اليوم الثاني في صراع للسيطرة على مصفاة النفط. وفي الوقت نفسه حذرت الأمم المتحدة من هجوم وشق الدعم السريع على مدينة الفاشر غرب السودان. الشهوريان ذكروا أن شمال الخرطوم غطتها سحب دخان كثيفة بسبب الشبكات في جيلي. يوم الأربعاء شن الجيش هجوما على مناطق شمالي مدينة بحري وسيطر على الجيلي ومناطق أخرى مثل كباشي وسقاي وفقا لشهادات محلية. مقاطع فيديو على وسائل التواصل أسهلت جنود الجيش يسيطرون على مدخل بلدة جيلي التي تعتبر بوابة شمالية لولاية الخرطوم. ومن جهتها أعلنت قوة الدعم السريع في بيان أنها صدت هجوما على مصفى جيلي، وهي أكبر مصفى نفطية في السودان وتقع شمال بحري، وتسيطر عليها قوة الدعم السريع منذ بدء القتال في سنة 2023. وفي سياق آخر، أبرد الأمم المتحدة عن قلقها عن تقارير تفيد بتحضير الدعم السريع لهجوم على الفاشر. وقال المتحدث باسم مفوضية حقوق الإنسان سيف مانغونغوا إنه الدعم السريع أنزل الجيش والقوات المتحالفة معه بمغادرة الفاشر ومحددا بهجوم قريب. وأخيرا في كينيا أسر الإبلاغ عن اختفاء أكثر من 80 منتقد الحكومة خلال الأشهر الستة الماضية موجة غضب شعبي كبير في كينيا. وحذر قادم من أنه سيسجن كبار المسؤولين الأمنيين بتهمة ازدراء المحكمة يوم الاثنين إذا فشل في الوصول أمامها للمرة الثالثة لتقديم تفسير حول سلسلة من حالة اختطاف المزعومة الأخيرة. ترتبط القضية بحالة اختطاف اللي وثقتها اللجنة الوطنية لحقوق الإنسان في كينيا منذ اندلاع الاحتجاجات الوطنية ضد زيادات ضريبية مقترحة في يونيو الماضي. ولا يزال ما لا يقل عن 24 شخص في أعداد المفقودين. وتنفي الشرطة والحكومة تورطهما في عمل اختطاف أو احتجاز غير قانوني للمتظاهرين، لكن تاريخ كينيا في عمل اختطاف برعاية الدولة أثار مخاوف من عودة البلاد إلى هذا الماضي المظلم. وبالخبر ده مستمع آي راديو انتهى نشرة الأخبار، ولكن برجع وبذكر بأبرز ما جاء في المقدمة. أعرب خبير اقتصادي ومستشار في مكتب نائب الرئيس الدكتور جيمس وانييغا عن مخاوف بشأن التداعيات الاقتصادية لحظر وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي اللي فرضته الهيئة القومية للاتصالات. قال ممثل للشباب في عملية السلام اللي تقودها كينيا في جنوب السودان بأن مبادرة تومايني يجب أن تضمن تنفيذ صندوق تنمية المشاريع الشباب. وتواصلت المعارك بين الجيش السوداني وقوات الدعم السريع في بلدة جيلي شمال الخرطوم اليوم الثاني في صراع للسيطرة على مصفى النفط. إلى هنا مستمع آي راديو انتهى نشرة أخبار. لأنك أي خبر أو مناسبة أو أنت تلوح وتغطية ممكن ترسل لنا رسالة نصية رقم التالي 0925-287-870 وده نفس الرقم للواتساب. أنت ممكن تتابعنا على منصة إكس آي راديو جبا كلمة واحدة وسجل إجابتك بصفحتنا الفيسبوك آي راديو. اشترك في قناة بتاعنا اليوتيوب آي راديو ساوث سودان أو زيارة موقعنا على الإنترنت www.iradio.org لتستمع الأخبار باللغة العربية والإنجليزية.